They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but let me tell you something. Sometimes it's served in a courtroom with legal documents and a smile that nobody sees coming. My name is Miranda Hayes, and this is the story of how I turned 15 years of silence into the sweetest victory of my life. It started on a Wednesday afternoon. Not a Tuesday like you might expect, but a Wednesday. Marcus, my husband of 15 years, walked into our bedroom where I was folding laundry. Our laundry. The sheets we'd slept on together for over a decade. He stood there in his expensive suit, the one I'd helped him pick out for a client meeting 2 months prior. And he said the words that would change everything. "I want a divorce, Miranda. And I want the house, the business, the cars. You can have Sophia. Our daughter. Our 12-year-old daughter." He said it like she was a leftover he was generously allowing me to keep. Like she was something he didn't want anymore. Not because he didn't love her, but because keeping her would interfere with his new life, his new plans, his new everything. I remember standing there with a pillowcase in my hands, looking at this man I'd known since I was 18 years old, and feeling something crack inside me. Not break, crack. There's a difference. When something breaks, it's sudden and loud and everyone knows. When something cracks, it's quiet, patient, waiting. What I didn't say in that moment, what I couldn't say, was that I'd been expecting this conversation for exactly 2 years and 7 months. Because that's how long I'd known about everything. The hidden debts, the secret accounts, the financial disaster Marcus had been building while everyone thought he was building an empire. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started. Back to when I was young and hopeful and believed in fairy tales. I met Marcus when I was 18 years old. I just finished my first year of college, studying graphic design at the community college downtown. I was working part-time at Davidson Legal Associates as a file clerk. It wasn't glamorous work. Paper cuts, endless filing, coffee runs. But it was honest money, and I was learning how law firms operated, how contracts worked, how to read the fine print that most people ignore. Marcus was 25 when we met. He came to the firm for a consultation about starting his own property development company. He had this energy about him, this confidence that made you believe anything was possible. He talked about building communities, creating homes, changing the landscape of our city. He made it all sound so real, so achievable. As he changed the landscape of our city, he dark and fixed in, he made it all sound so real, so achievable. We dated for 2 years. He'd take me to construction sites and show me empty lots, describing the buildings that would stand there someday. The families that would live in those homes, the legacy he'd create. I'd listen and imagine our future together. A future where I'd help him build something meaningful. We got married when I was 20. It was a small ceremony. His mother, Constance, barely smiled through the whole thing. She'd wanted Marcus to marry someone from their social circle, someone with family money and connections. Instead, he chose a girl who worked as a file clerk and studied design at community college. Constance made her feelings clear from day one. She'd introduce me at family gatherings with this tight smile and say things like, "This is Miranda, Marcus's wife. She's very sweet." The way she said sweet made it sound like simple, like I was a nice pet Marcus had picked up somewhere. Sophia was born when I was 21, my beautiful, brilliant daughter. From the moment I held her, I knew I'd do anything to protect her. Anything to give her a better life than I'd had. Anything to make sure she grew up knowing her worth. At 24, Marcus's business finally started taking off. He'd landed a major contract to develop a residential complex on the east side of town. 30 homes, good profit margins, real momentum. He needed help managing everything. The paperwork, the clients, the contractors, the finances. He asked me to leave my job at the law firm and work with him full-time. No salary, he explained, because we needed every dollar to reinvest in the business. But I'd be a partner in everything we built, an equal. I should have gotten that in writing. But I was 24 and in love, and believed that marriage meant we were already partners in everything. So I quit my job, left behind the small but steady paycheck, the retirement contributions, the independence I'd been building. For the next 11 years, I became Marcus's unpaid everything. I managed the books, handled client communications, coordinated with contractors, designed marketing materials, staged model homes, organized events. I did all of this while raising Sophia, managing our household, making sure everyone was fed and happy and taken care of. My official title was wife and mother. My unofficial title was Chief Operating Officer, accountant, designer, event coordinator, therapist, chef, and whatever else needed doing on any given day. Marcus got all the credit. At every industry event, every award ceremony, every celebration, he'd thank his team, his mentors, his vision. Sometimes he'd mention me in passing. My wife Miranda has been very supportive. That was it. Very supportive. Like I'd been cheering from the sidelines instead of running half the operation. Somewhere around year 8 of our marriage, things started shifting. Marcus began making major decisions without consulting me. He'd sign contracts I hadn't reviewed, take on projects I hadn't vetted, spend money from accounts I was supposed to be managing. When I'd question him, he'd get defensive. I'm the one with the business degree, Miranda. I know what I'm doing. Trust me. So I trusted him. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You trust them. He started staying late at the office more often, coming home at 9, 10, 11 at night. He'd say he was meeting with investors, schmoozing with clients, building relationships. I'd have dinner waiting, already cold. He'd eat quickly, barely talking, then go to his home office to work more. The criticism started small. Comments about my appearance. You used to dress better. Maybe you should join that gym your sister goes to. Little jabs that individually seemed harmless, but together formed a pattern. Then came the bigger criticisms. You don't understand the business side of things. You're too emotional about decisions. You lack vision. This from the man whose books I'd been managing for nearly a decade, whose vision I'd been helping implement since the beginning. But I stayed quiet, kept working, kept hoping things would get better once the current project finished, once the next deal closed, once the stress eased up. I became very good at making excuses for Marcus's behavior. Then came that afternoon, 2 years and 7 months before the divorce announcement. The afternoon that changed everything. It was a Saturday. Marcus was at a golf tournament with clients. Sophia was at a friend's birthday party. I was home alone, trying to reconcile some discrepancies in our business accounts. Numbers that didn't quite add up. Expenses that seemed unusually high. I started digging deeper, following trails through bank statements and credit card bills and loan documents. What I found made my hands shake so badly, I had to set down my coffee cup before I dropped it. Marcus had mortgaged our house. Not once, 3 times. The original mortgage from when we bought it 12 years ago, $420,000. I knew about that one. A second mortgage taken out 3 years ago for $300,000. I didn't know about that one. A third mortgage taken out 18 months ago for another $350,000. I definitely didn't know about that one. Our house, the beautiful 4-bedroom home in Riverside Heights that everyone admired, had $1.07 million in debt against it. The current market value was maybe $875,000. We were underwater by nearly $200,000 on our own home. I sat there staring at those numbers until they blurred. Then I kept digging. The business was worse. So much worse. Credit lines maxed out at $230,000. Tax liens totaling $92,000. Vendor debts of $145,000. Equipment loans of $88,000. The company that Marcus bragged about at dinner parties, the company that was supposedly thriving and expanding, was drowning in over $500,000 of debt. Even our cars weren't real. All 3 vehicles, the luxury sedan Marcus drove, the SUV I used for Sophia's activities, even the truck for business use, all leased with balloon payments coming due. We owned nothing. We just had very expensive monthly obligations that were slowly strangling us. I spent the entire weekend going through everything I could access. By Sunday night, I had the full picture. Total debt, approximately $2.1 million. Total actual asset value, maybe $1.7 million. We were $400,000 in the hole, possibly more. But where had all the money gone? That was the question that kept me up that night and many nights after. Over the following weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I created a separate email account. I started taking photos of documents with my phone when Marcus wasn't around. I made copies of everything and stored them at my sister's house. And slowly, piece by piece, I uncovered where our money had actually gone. Cryptocurrency investments that Marcus never mentioned, $195,000, all lost when the market crashed. Online gambling, sports betting, poker sites, casino games, $83,000 gone. An apartment I didn't know existed, rented under the business name but used for personal purposes, for a woman I'd never heard of. $72,000 in rent and furnishings over 3 years? Luxury purchases that never made it home. Designer watches, custom suits, weekend trips I wasn't invited on, private club memberships, another $98,000. My husband wasn't building an empire. He was building a mirage. We looked successful, the same way a movie set looks real. Convincing from the right angle, completely hollow behind the facade. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. My first instinct was to confront Marcus immediately, to throw every document in his face and demand explanations. Just scream about the lies and the secrets and the complete betrayal of everything we'd built together. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the years of watching Marcus operate, seeing how he could talk his way out of anything, twist any situation to make himself look reasonable. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was my grandmother's voice in my head. My grandmother, Catherine. She'd passed away when I was 25, but her lessons stayed with me. She'd been married to my grandfather for 47 years, and she'd always kept her own bank account. Not secret money, she'd always say. Just mine. A woman needs her own resources, her own safety net. When Grandma Catherine died, she left me $360,000. Her will was very specific. This inheritance is for Miranda Hayes alone. It is not to be considered marital property. It is hers to protect and use as she sees fit. I kept that money in a separate account for 9 years. Never commingled it with Marcus's business finances. Never used it for household expenses. I'd invested it conservatively. Watched it grow slowly and steadily. By the time I discovered Marcus's debt, my inheritance had grown to about $410,000. One sentence, it is hers to protect and use as she sees fit. I kept that money in a separate account for 9 years, never commingled it with Marcus's business finances, never used it for household expenses, never used it for household expenses. I'd invested it conservatively, watched it grow slowly and steadily. By the time I discovered Marcus's debt, my inheritance had grown to about $410,000. I also had my retirement account from my years at the law firm. I'd rolled it over when I left, but never touched it. With contributions and growth over the years, it had reached about $205,000. Combined, I had roughly $615,000 that was completely, legally, provably separate from Marcus and his disaster. Money he couldn't touch. Money he didn't even know the full extent of. When I found out about Marcus's debts, my first thought was protecting Sophia's future. I couldn't stop Marcus from destroying himself, but I could make sure our daughter didn't go down with him. I worked with my uncle, a retired estate attorney, to create an irrevocable trust for Sophia. My inheritance and retirement funds went into that trust. The terms were clear. The money was for Sophia's education, her first home, medical emergencies, life milestones. Neither Marcus nor I were listed as beneficiaries. We were merely trustees with very limited powers. That money was untouchable, protected, safe. Then I documented everything else. Every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden account, every suspicious transaction. I created multiple copies, stored them in different locations. My sister's house, a safe deposit box at a bank across town, encrypted digital files in cloud storage. And then I waited. I knew Marcus would leave eventually. Men like him always do. They get bored, or they find someone younger, or they decide they deserve something more. The signs were already there. The late nights, the distance, the criticism. He was already halfway out the door emotionally. It was just a matter of time before he made it official. 2 years and 7 months, I waited. 2 years and 7 months of watching Marcus dig himself deeper into debt while I quietly prepared for the inevitable. 2 years and 7 months of smiling at dinner parties while knowing our entire life was built on borrowed money and broken promises. I got very, very good at pretending everything was fine. During those 2 years, Marcus's behavior got worse. The late nights became later. The criticism became harsher. The distance became a canyon. He started talking about me differently at social gatherings. I'd overhear him at parties, talking to his friends. Miranda's great with Sophia, but she doesn't really understand the business world. She's more of a domestic type. Domestic type. After 11 years of managing every aspect of his business operations, his mother, Constance, became older in her disapproval. She'd make comments at family dinners. Marcus works so hard. He deserves someone who really appreciates his success. Someone on his level. She'd say this while I was sitting right there, like I was furniture, like I couldn't hear her. Then there were the phone calls. Marcus would step out of rooms to take calls, closing doors behind him. His phone started having a password I didn't know. He'd angle the screen away from me when he was texting. I didn't ask questions, didn't snoop, didn't confront. I just watched and waited and documented everything that might be useful later. About 6 months before the divorce announcement, a woman started appearing in Marcus's social media posts. Her name was Jade Peterson, 28 years old, worked in marketing at one of Marcus's client companies. Blonde hair, perfect teeth, yoga instructor body. She'd show up in group photos from business events. Marcus would tag her in posts about successful meetings and new projects. Always professional, always carefully worded. But I could read between the lines. I looked her up, found her Instagram, her LinkedIn, her whole digital presence. She posted about wellness and ambition and living your best life. Lots of sunset photos with inspirational quotes. Lots of photos in expensive restaurants and trendy bars. She was young enough to not know better. Young enough to believe Marcus's stories about his success. Young enough to not see the debt hiding behind the designer suits and luxury car. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Finally, that Wednesday afternoon arrived. Marcus came home and delivered his prepared speech. I want a divorce. I want everything. You can keep Sophia. I reacted exactly how he expected me to react. Shock, tears, pleading questions. Why? What did I do wrong? Can't we work this out? He had his answers ready. We've grown apart. I need someone who understands my ambitions. You'll be fine. I'll make sure you're taken care of. That last part was my favorite. He'd make sure I was taken care of. The man who was $400,000 in debt was going to take care of me. Generous. I asked him what he wanted from me. His answer was simple and devastating. Sign over your rights to the house, the business, the vehicles, everything. I'll give you a fair settlement, enough to start fresh. We'll share custody of Sophia. But she should probably live with you primarily. I'll be traveling a lot for work. Traveling for work. He meant traveling with Jade. That night, after Sophia went to bed crying because Daddy was moving out, I sat in my bedroom and looked at the man I'd spent 15 years of my life with. Really looked at him. He was packing a suitcase, moving quickly and efficiently. He'd already planned this, already had somewhere to go. Probably Jade's apartment, the one I'd discovered he'd been paying rent on for the past 8 months. Another expense I'd found buried in the business accounts. "Where will you stay?" I asked quietly. "A friend's place. Just until I find something permanent." "A friend." Right. He left that night, walked out of our bedroom, past Sophia's closed door, down the stairs and out the front door. 15 years of marriage, and he left without looking back. The next morning, his lawyer called. Gerald Morrison, partner at Morrison & Chen, one of the most expensive family law firms in the city. He was professional, cordial, efficient. "Mr. Hayes has asked me to initiate divorce proceedings. We'd like to move forward as amicably as possible, for Sophia's sake." For Sophia's sake. Everyone was suddenly very concerned about Sophia's sake. Gerald explained that Marcus was willing to be generous. A cash settlement of $60,000. Primary physical custody of Sophia. Division of personal belongings. In exchange, I would relinquish all claims to the house, the business, the vehicles, and any other marital assets. $60,000. For 15 years of marriage, 11 years of unpaid labor building his business, raising his child, managing his entire life. I told Gerald I needed time to think. Time to find my own lawyer. Time to process. He was understanding. "Of course, Mrs. Hayes, take the time you need. We're not trying to rush you." They absolutely were trying to rush me. Gerald called again 2 days later. Then 3 days after that. Then Marcus started texting. "Please don't drag this out, Miranda. Let's keep this simple. For Sophia. Always for Sophia. Never for me. Never because it was the right thing to do. Always using our daughter as leverage." Within a week, Constance showed up at the house. She'd brought boxes and garbage bags. She was there to help me pack, she said. To help me figure out what I'd be taking to my new place. "Recently, I haven't found a new place yet," I told her. Strong. She looked around our beautiful home, the home I decorated and maintained and filled with 12 years of memories. "Well, you'll need to move quickly. Marcus has plans for this house." Strong. Plans. He had plans that included erasing me from every space I'd occupied. Strong. Constance went through my belongings like she was sorting donations. She decided what I deserved to keep and what belonged to Marcus. She was generous with old clothes and worn-out items. Not so generous with anything of value. Strong. The jewelry Marcus had given me over the years. "That stays," Constance said. "Those are marital assets." Strong. My grandmother's china. "Well, that's a family heirloom, isn't it? Should probably stay in the family." The antique mirror I'd found at an estate sale and refinished myself. "Marcus paid for that, dear. It stays." She packed what she deemed mine into garbage bags. Actual garbage bags. Like I was trash being removed from the premises. I watched her do it. Didn't fight. Didn't argue. Just stood there looking devastated, while internally calculating exactly how much debt she didn't know her precious son had accumulated. Through all of this, I had one friend I thought I could trust completely. Rachel Torres. We've been best friends since college. 17 years of friendship. She was my maid of honor at my wedding. Sophia's godmother. My sister in every way that mattered. Rachel was the first person I called after Marcus's announcement. She came over immediately, brought wine and tissues, let me cry on her couch. She was horrified by what Marcus was doing, supportive of whatever I decided, ready to help in any way she could. She called regularly to check on me, came over to keep me company, listened to all my fears and frustrations about the divorce process. What I didn't realize at first was that Rachel was listening to everything and reporting it all back to Marcus. It started with small things. I'd mentioned to Rachel that I was thinking about fighting for half the business. The next day, Marcus would text me, "Don't make this ugly, Miranda. The business is my life's work." I'd tell Rachel I was looking at apartments in Brookfield, the good school district where I wanted Sophia to stay. That evening, Marcus would call, "Brookfield is expensive, Miranda. Maybe look at something more in your price range." It took me 3 weeks to figure out what was happening. 3 weeks of watching my private conversations somehow reach Marcus's ears. Finally, I tested it. I told Rachel I was considering hiring an aggressive lawyer who specialized in high-conflict divorces, that I was going to fight for everything. Within 4 hours, Marcus called, upset, angry, accusing me of trying to destroy him out of spite. That's when it clicked. Rachel, my best friend of 17 years, was telling Marcus everything. I thought back over our friendship, over all the years, how she always asked about Marcus first whenever we talked. How is Marcus? How's the business doing? Is Marcus happy with how things are going? How she'd light up when he walked into a room. How she'd laugh just a little too hard at his jokes, touch his arm just a little too often when they talked. She'd been in love with Marcus for years, maybe since the beginning. And Marcus, because he collected admirers like trophies, knew exactly how to use that. He'd probably promised her things, implied that once the divorce was final, maybe they could explore something. Given her just enough hope to keep her loyal, to keep her reporting back to him. My best friend had sold me out for the possibility of being with a man who would never actually choose her. A man who was already with Jade, already planning his future with someone else. I didn't confront Rachel, didn't give her the dramatic confrontation she probably expected eventually. I just stopped telling her anything important, stopped returning her calls as quickly, let the friendship fade into polite distance. She tried for a while, kept calling, kept asking what was wrong, kept trying to get me to open up. I stayed pleasant and vague. "I'm fine, Rachel, just busy with the divorce process." Eventually, she stopped trying. Our 17-year friendship ended, not with a fight, but with silence. But while the adults around me were playing their games of betrayal and manipulation, Sophia was watching everything. My smart, observant, beautiful daughter was seeing exactly who everyone really was. She noticed Marcus bringing Jade to the house within 2 weeks of moving out. Noticed Jade wearing my apron, using my kitchen, acting like she belonged in our home. She noticed Constance packing my belongings in garbage bags while treating Marcus's girlfriend like welcomed family. She noticed Rachel asking too many questions, being too interested in things that weren't her business. Sophia was 12 years old, but she understood more than any of them realized. One evening, about a month after Marcus moved out, Sophia came to me while I was making dinner in our temporary apartment. I'd had to move out of the house by then. Marcus wanted it empty so he could prepare it for sale, or so he said. "Mom," she said quietly, sitting at our small kitchen table, "is Dad lying about the money?" I looked at my daughter for a long moment. "What makes you ask that?" She shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "He bought a new watch last week, a really expensive one, but he told me he couldn't afford the school trip to Chicago because money's tight." My 12-year-old had noticed the disconnect between Marcus's spending and his excuses. She'd noticed what he was too arrogant to hide. "He's going through some things right now," I said carefully. "Adults sometimes make complicated choices." She looked at me with those knowing eyes. "You know something you're not saying." I smiled at her. "Trust me, sweetheart. Just a little bit longer. Everything is going to make sense soon." She nodded slowly. "I trust you, Mom, more than anyone." That moment right there. That was when I knew every sleepless night, every humiliating moment, every second of playing weak and defeated, it was all worth it. Because my daughter trusted me, believed in me, even when she didn't understand what I was doing. While I was playing the part of broken wife, I was also preparing for war. I hired Elena Rosario, one of the best family law attorneys in the state. She was 57 years old. had been practicing for 32 years, and had a reputation for absolutely destroying unprepared opponents in court. She was expensive, very expensive. But I paid her retainer from my separate funds, the money Marcus didn't know about, and I laid out everything for her. Elena spent 2 full days reviewing my documentation. Every mortgage, every loan, every hidden account, every piece of evidence I'd collected over 2.5 years. When she finally looked up at me, her expression had changed completely. "You've known about all of this for over 2 years," she said. It wasn't a question. I was waiting for him to leave. I knew he would eventually, and when he demanded everything, he demanded all the debt along with it. Elena leaned back in her chair. The professional mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw genuine admiration underneath. "Mrs. Hayes," she said carefully, "I've been practicing family law for 3 decades. I've seen all kinds of strategies, but this is exceptional." The trap was already built. We just had to let Marcus walk into it. The strategy was simple but devastating. I would agree to give Marcus everything he wanted: the house, the business, the cars, all of it, in exchange for my small settlement and primary custody of Sophia. But attached to that agreement would be a complete liability disclosure statement. Every mortgage, every loan, every debt tied to each asset. When Marcus signed to receive the assets, he would be legally assuming sole responsibility for all associated liabilities. The mortgages would become his alone. The business debts would transfer entirely to him. The lease obligations would be his problem. All of it, clearly documented, legally binding, absolutely devastating. Elena drafted the agreements with surgical precision. The main divorce agreement was straightforward. Marcus gets all marital assets. Miranda gets $60,000 cash, primary physical custody of Sophia, and her personal belongings. Then came the addendum. Pages and pages of detailed financial disclosures. Every debt listed, every liability itemized, every obligation specified. When Marcus signs for the house, he assumes $1.07 million in mortgage debt on a property worth $875,000. When he signs for the business, he assumes $555,000 in various debts and obligations. When he signs for the vehicles, he assumes $128,000 in lease liabilities. All told, Marcus would be signing his name to roughly $1.75 million in debt, while receiving assets worth approximately $1.6 million. He'd be inheriting a $400,000 hole, and it would be entirely, legally, his. The documents are perfect, I told Elena after reviewing them. She smiled. Now we just have to make sure he signs them without looking too closely. That part was easy, because Marcus was impatient, arrogant, and absolutely convinced he was getting away with something. The next 3 months were a performance worthy of an award. I became exactly what everyone expected me to be. Defeated, broken, barely holding myself together. I showed up to mediation sessions with puffy eyes and shaking hands. I spoke quietly, hesitantly, like a woman who'd lost all her confidence. I requested so little that even the mediator seemed uncomfortable. "I just want enough to start over," I said during our 3rd session. "I don't want to fight anymore. I just want this to be over." Marcus agreed to everything immediately. He'd been preparing for a battle, gearing up to fight me for every asset. Instead, I handed him victory on a silver platter. He looked at me across that mediation table with something between pity and contempt. He thought he'd won, thought he'd gotten away with everything. Gerald Morrison, his lawyer, seemed almost confused by how easy this was. He kept asking if I was certain about my decisions, if I understood what I was giving up. "I understand," I said softly. "I just want what's fair. I don't want to take anything that's his." "What's his?" The debt was definitely his. Meanwhile, Marcus's arrogance reached new heights. He started making plans for the house, talking about renovations he'd do before selling it. He bought himself a new luxury watch, wore it to our mediation sessions to make sure I noticed. He took Jade to Bellissimo, the Italian restaurant where we'd celebrated our 10th anniversary. posted photos on social media with captions about new chapters and fresh starts. Jade had moved into my house fully by then. Redecorated my living room, repainted my kitchen. She chose beige. Beige walls where I'd had warm terracotta. Beige like her personality, like her future with Marcus once she discovered the truth. Constance was delighted with how things were going. She told everyone who would listen that Marcus was keeping everything, that I hadn't fought for anything, that she'd always known I wasn't strong enough for her son. She actually said that at her book club. I know because my sister was there and reported back. Constance stood up in front of 20 women and announced that I'd given up without a fight, that Marcus was getting everything he deserved. She had no idea what he was actually getting. Rachel kept trying to maintain our friendship, kept calling and texting. I stayed polite but distant, giving her nothing she could report back to Marcus. I'm just focusing on Sophia right now. I'd tell her, trying to keep things stable for her. Rachel would fish for information. Have you found a good lawyer? Are you going to fight for the house? What's your settlement looking like? I'd give vague answers. My lawyer says we're making progress. I just want what's fair. I'm trying not to stress about it too much. Within hours, Marcus would know everything I'd said, which was exactly nothing useful. But while everyone was focused on the divorce drama, something else was happening. Sophia was pulling away from her father. She saw Jade in our house, acting like she belonged here. Saw the new furniture, the new paint, all the ways this stranger was erasing me from our home. She heard Marcus's excuses about money. Heard him say they couldn't afford things while wearing a $15,000 watch. She watched him choose his new girlfriend over time with his daughter. Watched him cancel plans because Jade wanted to do something else. My daughter was forming her own opinions, making her own judgments, and Marcus was too self-absorbed to notice he was losing her. One Saturday afternoon, Sophia was supposed to spend the day with Marcus. He was supposed to take her shopping for her birthday, which was coming up in 2 weeks. They had plans, reservations at her favorite restaurant, a whole day together. 2 hours before he was supposed to pick her up, he texted. Something came up at work. Can we reschedule? Something came up. I checked Jade's Instagram later. She'd posted photos from a wine tasting event in Napa Valley. Marcus was in the background of one photo, laughing and holding a wine glass. Work emergency, right? Sophia saw the post too. She didn't say anything, just quietly deleted her father's contact photo from her phone. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning, June 23rd. Judge Patricia Holden presiding. 2 weeks before the hearing, Gerald Morrison called Elena with a request. My client is assuming significant assets, he said carefully. I'd like to request a comprehensive financial audit before we finalize, just to verify all values and liabilities. Elena kept her voice neutral. Of course. We'll provide whatever documentation you need. But when Gerald brought this to Marcus, my soon-to-be ex-husband, shut it down immediately. No audits, Marcus told him. I built this business. I know exactly what everything is worth. I'm not paying thousands of dollars for some accountant to tell me what I already know. Gerald pushed back hard. I strongly recommend we verify asset values and associated debts before you sign these documents. This is a substantial amount of property we're talking about. No, Marcus insisted. Jade wants this finished. I want this finished. No more delays. Jade wants this finished. My favorite sentence in this whole story. Gerald Morrison had been practicing law for 34 years. He knew when a client was about to make a catastrophic mistake. He also knew he couldn't force someone to take good advice. He did the only thing he could do. He presented Marcus with a waiver, a document acknowledging that Gerald had strongly recommended an independent financial review, and that Marcus was declining this advice against counsel's recommendation. Marcus signed it without reading it, just like he'd sign everything else without reading it. Never underestimate the power of an impatient girlfriend and male eager to make someone skip crucial details. The night before the hearing, Marcus sent me a text message. Thank you for being reasonable about everything. I know this has been hard, but I appreciate you not making it worse. I stared at that message for a long time. 15 years of marriage, 11 years of building his business, raising his daughter, managing his entire existence. And he was thanking me for not making his exit difficult. I typed back, I just want what's best for Sophia. That was true. The trust fund, her future secured, her college paid for. That was what was best for Sophia. What was also best for Sophia was watching her mother refuse to be destroyed. Watching her mother fight back intelligently instead of desperately. Learning that patience and strategy matter more than dramatic confrontation. Elena called me that evening. Thursday morning, 9:30, courtroom 6. Judge Holden is fair, but no nonsense. Are you ready? I looked around my small apartment, the one I'd rented with my $60,000 settlement money. The one with secondhand furniture and cheerful yellow walls I painted myself. The one that was small and imperfect and entirely mine. I've been ready for almost 3 years. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Thursday morning, June 23rd, courtroom 6. I remember every single detail of that morning. The way the light streamed through the tall courthouse windows. The smell of floor polish and old wood. The sound of lawyers conferring in hushed voices while court staff prepared for the day's cases. This was where my 15-year marriage would officially end. Where 3 years of patience would finally pay off. Marcus arrived early, which surprised me. He was wearing his best suit, navy blue with subtle pinstripes. The one I'd helped him choose for a major client presentation 4 years ago. His new watch caught the light when he moved his hand. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man about to close a very favorable business deal. Jade was in the hallway. She wasn't allowed in the courtroom, but she'd come for moral support. I could see her through the glass doors, scrolling through her phone, sipping an iced coffee. Perfect makeup, designer handbag, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. Constance was there too, sitting in the gallery like she was attending a social event. She'd dressed up for the occasion, probably planning to take Marcus to a celebratory lunch afterward. When I walked in, she gave me this little smile. The smile of someone who thinks they've already won. I'd dressed carefully that morning. Simple gray dress, modest heels, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a neat bun. I looked tired, defeated, like a woman who'd been ground down by the process and just wanted it over with. I looked like someone who'd given up on everything, including her appearance. Very convincing. Elena sat beside me at the defendant's table. She was the picture of professional competence in her tailored suit. Leather briefcase organized with color-coded tabs. She'd been doing this for 32 years. Nothing surprised her anymore. Judge Patricia Holden entered, and everyone rose. She was in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. 35 years on the family court bench. She'd seen every manipulation, every lie, every dirty trick divorcing couples could devise. Hayes versus Hayes, she said, reviewing the file in front of her. Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement. Gerald stood first. Yes, Your Honor. My client, Marcus Hayes, is assuming all marital assets, including the family residence, the property development business, and all associated vehicles. In exchange, Mrs. Hayes receives a cash settlement of $60,000 and primary physical custody of the minor child. Elena rose beside me. That's correct, Your Honor. My client agrees to relinquish all claims to marital assets and accepts the proposed settlement terms. Judge Holden looked at me directly. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. Mrs. Hayes, she said, I need to confirm you understand what you're agreeing to today. You're giving up your claim to substantial property, the family home, a business you helped build, Are you certain this is what you want? I kept my voice soft, slightly unsteady. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. You're entering this agreement voluntarily? No one is pressuring you? No, Your Honor. I dropped my gaze to my hands, then looked back up at her. I just want my husband to have everything he's asking for. I want this to be over so we can both move forward. Judge Holden studied me for another long moment. I could see her internal debate. Should she push harder? Order a continuance? Protect me from what looked like a terrible decision? But I was an adult woman, represented by excellent counsel, answering clearly and consistently. She couldn't save me from my own choices. Very well, she said finally. Let's proceed with the dissolution. The clerk distributed the final documents. Page after page of legal language. Signature lines every few pages. Marcus signed quickly, barely glancing at what he was agreeing to. He wanted this done. Wanted to get back to his new life, his new girlfriend, his new freedom from the burden of family. I signed slowly, carefully. Every signature deliberate and precise. This was the moment I'd been waiting 3 years for. I was going to remember it. Across the courtroom, Marcus glanced at Constance and smiled. She nodded back, proud and approving. In the hallway, his phone buzzed, probably Jade asking how it was going. Meanwhile, Gerald Morrison was doing what good lawyers do, reviewing the complete document package one final time before it became official. Main agreement, signed. Asset schedule, signed. Settlement terms, signed. Child custody arrangement, signed. Then he reached the addendum, the liability disclosure statement. I watched his face as he read. Watched confusion flicker across his features. Watched him flip back a page, then forward again, like he was hoping he'd misread something. He hadn't. Gerald's face went pale. He leaned toward Marcus, trying to maintain discretion, while the court reporter was transcribing and the judge was reviewing her copy. Sir, he whispered urgently. We need to talk. Marcus waved him off, still basking in his victory. Not now. We're almost finished. Sir, Gerald's voice carried more urgency. The liability disclosure, the debts. Vincent turned to look at him, annoyed at the interruption. What about them? You're assuming personal responsibility for all of them. Gerald's whisper was harsh now. The mortgages, the business loans, the lease obligations, it's all here in the addendum. For the first time all morning, Marcus actually looked at what he'd signed. Really looked at it. I watched his face as he processed the numbers, watched the color drain away, watched his hands start to shake. House, $1.07 million owed. Market value, $875,000. Net negative, $195,000. Business, $555,000 in combined debts and obligations. Current value questionable given outstanding liabilities. Vehicles, $128,000 in lease commitments and balloon payments. Additional disclosed liabilities, $280,000 in various loans, tax liens, and obligations. Total debt Marcus had just claimed as his own, approximately $1.75 million. Total actual value of assets received, maybe $1.6 million. He'd just signed his name to a $400,000 hole, and every signature was his, every page initialed, every acknowledgement checked. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the courtroom floor. This isn't right. He looked at me, then at the judge, then back at the papers in front of him. She hid this from me. This has to be fraud. Judge Holden's voice cut through the room like a knife. Mr. Hayes, sit down. These numbers are wrong. Marcus insisted, voice rising. She manipulated the documents. This is financial fraud. Mr. Hayes. The judge's tone left no room for argument. Sit down now. He sat, but his hands were trembling. The confident smile had vanished, replaced by something that looked a lot like panic. Judge Holden reviewed the documents in front of her, taking her time. Then she looked at Marcus over her reading glasses. Mr. Hayes, she said carefully, I'm looking at the liability disclosure statement attached to this agreement. These are debts associated with assets you are claiming. Assets in your name. Your business, your property. Am I correct? Silence. Are these or are these not obligations tied to property you own? Marcus's voice was barely audible. Yes. And did you review these documents before signing? More silence. Mr. Hayes, Judge Holden's voice sharpened. Did you review the complete agreement, including all addendums, before adding your signature to these pages? I looked at them, he said weakly. Gerald cleared his throat. Your Honor, if I may, I should note for the record that I advised my client to conduct an independent financial review and comprehensive audit before signing. He declined. I have written documentation of this advisement and his refusal. He produced the waiver, the one Marcus had signed without reading 2 weeks ago. Judge Holden examined it briefly. So Mr. Hayes was advised by counsel to verify these figures. He chose not to. He signed a waiver acknowledging that choice. She looked at Marcus. Is that correct? Marcus was staring at the waiver like it was a snake. I didn't think I needed to, he said. I thought I knew. You thought you knew your own financial situation, Judge Holden said flatly, but you didn't verify it before signing legal documents claiming all assets and associated liabilities. She paused, letting that sink in. Mr. Hayes, these are your debts, your mortgages, your business loans, your obligations. Mrs. Hayes did not create them or hide them. They exist in your name, tied to assets in your name. But I didn't know it was this bad, Marcus said desperately. Strong. Strong. That's not your wife's responsibility, the judge responded. That's yours. You had every opportunity to investigate. Your own attorney recommended you do exactly that. You refused. MS. Marcus said, I want to withdraw the agreement, Marcus said, panic clear in his voice now. I didn't understand what I was signing. This isn't fair. MS. Judge Holden shook her head. Mr. Hayes, you signed documents before this court stating you understood and agreed to all terms. You were represented by experienced counsel. You declined additional professional review. Your wife did not hide information from you. These are your obligations, properly disclosed in the legal documents you signed. She paused again. The agreement is binding and final. But, Marcus started. The agreement is final, Judge Holden repeated. Her voice was absolute. Mrs. Hayes, you have your settlement. Mr. Hayes, you have the assets as agreed, along with all associated liabilities. This marriage is dissolved. The gavel came down. I stood slowly, gathered my purse, smoothed my dress. Then I looked at Marcus one last time. He was slumped in his chair, papers scattered in front of him, his whole world crumbling around him. The confident businessman was gone. What remained was a man who just realized exactly what he'd done to himself. You said you wanted everything except Sophia, I said quietly. I gave you exactly what you asked for. I walked out of that courtroom and didn't look back. In the hallway, I could hear Marcus's raised voice, demanding to know how this happened, threatening appeals, blaming everyone except himself. Gerald's calm response carried through the doors. I told you to get an audit. I have it in writing. You refused. Through the glass, I saw Jade's face change as she tried to make sense of what she was overhearing. Saw her look at Marcus, really look at him, and see something other than the successful businessman she thought she was dating. She was gone before I reached the elevator, walking fast in her expensive heels, designer bag swinging, not looking back. She'd signed up for success and luxury, not debt and disaster. At least she was smart enough to run while she could. I stepped outside into the June sunshine. The sky was impossibly blue. The air was warm. Birds were singing in the courthouse trees, like this was just another beautiful day. Behind me, my ex-husband was screaming at his lawyer about fairness and fraud and how none of this was his fault. Ahead of me was my new life. Smaller, simpler, but entirely mine. The collapse happened faster than I expected. Within 3 weeks, Jade had moved out, packed her things in the middle of the night, left a note. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. The beige kitchen sat empty. All her tasteful, boring decorating disappeared like she'd never been there. Within 6 weeks, Marcus tried to sell the house. But when you owe more than something's worth, finding buyers becomes impossible. Just banks calling about missed payments and real estate agents suggesting short sales and bankruptcy. Within 2 months, the business started defaulting. Vendors filed lawsuits. The credit lines were frozen. Contractors refused to work without payment up front. The company Marcus had spent 16 years building, the company I'd spent 11 years supporting, crumbled into nothing. Within 3 months, Marcus was meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. The man who'd bragged about his empire was now calculating which assets he could protect from creditors. The answer was almost nothing. Constance's perfect son was calling relatives, asking for loans, showing up at family gatherings with explanations. I didn't know about the debt. Miranda must have hidden it somehow. I was deceived. But the documents told a different story. Every mortgage in his name, every loan in his name, every signature his, every decision his choice. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Constance's holiday letter that year was very brief. Marcus is exploring new opportunities. We're grateful for family support during this transition. Transitions. Such a polite word for financial disaster. Rachel tried to reach out about a week after the hearing. Her voice on my voicemail was shaking. Miranda, I just heard what happened. I had no idea things were that bad financially. I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this. I thought Marcus and I could, maybe. She couldn't even finish the sentence. I didn't call her back. Didn't respond to her texts. Some betrayals don't deserve closure. Some friendships don't get second chances. She'd sold out 17 years of friendship for promises from a man who used everyone around him. A man who was now drowning in debt and desperately trying to save himself. I imagine she's still waiting for Marcus to notice her. Still hoping for something that's never going to happen. She'll be waiting a long time. But the most important relationship through all of this was with Sophia. My brilliant, observant daughter who'd watched everything unfold. About 2 weeks after the hearing, she came to my apartment after school. Sat down at our kitchen table, the one I'd painted cheerful yellow. The one that was small, but ours. You knew, she said, not a question, a statement. You knew about all the debt, about everything. I looked at my daughter, at her serious eyes and set jaw. She deserved honesty. I found out almost 3 years ago, I told her. I've been preparing ever since. She was quiet for a moment, processing. You let Dad think he was winning. I let him have exactly what he asked for. Sophia smiled then, really smiled. It reminded me of my own smile in the courtroom, the smile of someone who understands justice. That's kind of brilliant, Mom. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Everything I did to protect you. To make sure you'd be okay, no matter what happened between your father and me. I know, she said quietly, and I trust you more than anyone. My 15-year-old daughter understood what Marcus never had. That protection isn't about control. It's about preparation, about making sure the people you love have what they need to build their own futures. The trust fund sat exactly where I put it. $615,000, grown now through careful investing to about $640,000. Sophia's future, college, first home, emergencies, opportunities, protected, untouchable. Mine to give her, but never mine to take back. My $60,000 settlement went toward building my new life. Rent for a year, basic furniture, professional design software, business cards for the interior design consulting I was starting. It wasn't luxury, but it was stability. It was mine. I enrolled in advanced design courses at the University Extension. Started building a client base. My first real client was a woman named Patricia, 58 years old, recently divorced after 31 years of marriage. She stood in her new apartment looking lost when she hired me. How you even start over? She asked. I thought about my answer carefully. One room at a time, one choice at a time, one day at a time. We painted her kitchen cheerful yellow. She cried when she saw the finished result. Happy tears, she said. The color of sunshine, of new beginnings. My business grew slowly but steadily. Word of mouth from satisfied clients. Small projects at first, then larger ones. Each job was a chance to help someone create a space that felt like home, like possibility, like starting over could actually work. About 4 months after the divorce was finalized, Marcus showed up at my apartment. I barely recognized him. He'd lost weight, the unhealthy kind. Dark circles under his eyes. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His confidence was gone. He looked like a man who'd been through a war and lost everything. Miranda, he said when I opened the door. Can we talk? I leaned against the door frame, studying him. This man I'd loved for most of my adult life. This man who'd thrown me away without a second thought. This man who was now drowning in consequences he'd created himself. I didn't know it was this bad, he said, his voice cracked. I made mistakes, huge mistakes, but I never meant for things to turn out like this. You never meant to get caught, I corrected quietly. He flinched. I need help, he said. Miranda, the bankruptcy, the debts. Maybe we could work something out. You could. He couldn't finish. Couldn't bring himself to ask for what he actually wanted. My money, my help, my forgiveness. After everything he'd done, he wanted me to save him. You told me you wanted everything except Sophia, I said calmly. You got exactly that. Everything. All of it. Every asset, every debt, every consequence. His face twisted. Please, I'm drowning here. You were drowning the whole time, I told him. You just didn't notice until the water covered your head. Miranda. His voice broke on my name. Goodbye, Marcus. I closed the door, locked it, walked back to my kitchen where Sophia was doing homework at our yellow table. Marcus stood in the hallway for 15 minutes. I know, because Sophia timed it while pretending to read her history textbook. Finally, we heard his footsteps walking away. Who was that? Sophia asked, even though she knew. Nobody important, I said. She grinned and went back to her homework. That evening, after Sophia went to bed, I sat in my small living room and looked at my grandmother's photo on the shelf. The recipe box sat beside it, rescued from Constance's grabby hands all those months ago. You were right about everything, Grandma. I said to the photograph. About keeping your own money, about knowing your worth, about never letting anyone make you feel small. The apartment was quiet, small, nothing like the house I'd lived in for 12 years. But it was mine. Every paint color, every piece of furniture, every decision. And for the first time in longer than I can remember, I was free. 6 months after the divorce, I got a message from Elena Rosario. Thought you'd want to know. Marcus Hayes filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy last week. The house is in foreclosure. The business is dissolving. He's moving in with his mother. I read the message twice. Felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no regret, just closure. Marcus had spent 16 years building a facade of success, spent our entire marriage creating an illusion of wealth. And when it finally collapsed, he discovered that illusions can't protect you from reality. I messaged Elena back. Thank you for letting me know. Then I went back to working on designs for my newest client. A young woman starting her first business, needing her office space to reflect her brand and values. She trusted me to help her build something real, something solid, something that would last. I was good at that now, building things that lasted. A year after the divorce, Sophia and I moved to a bigger apartment, 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, balcony with a view of the park. I could afford it now. My design business was thriving, my reputation growing. We painted the kitchen together, not yellow this time, a soft sage green that Sophia chose herself. It's peaceful, she said, admiring our work. Like everything's going to be okay. Everything is going to be okay, I told her. She smiled. I know, Mom. I've always known that. My daughter understood what I tried to teach her through action instead of words. That strength isn't always loud. That strategy matters more than drama. That patience and preparation will beat impulsive arrogance every single time. Marcus tried to contact me a few more times over that first year. Emails about how sorry he was, how he'd changed, how he understood now what he'd lost. I never responded. Some apologies are too late, and some bridges are meant to stay burned. The last I heard, he was working as a project manager for someone else's development company. Living with Constance, driving a 10-year-old sedan, rebuilding his life from nothing. Maybe he learned something from the experience, maybe he didn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. Constance never apologized, never acknowledged how she'd treated me. The last time I saw her was at Sophia's 8th grade graduation. She tried to speak to me, tried to say something about family and moving forward. I smiled politely, excused myself, and walked away. Some people don't deserve your energy, not even for closure. Rachel sent a long email about a year after the divorce. Pages of explanation about how Marcus had manipulated her, made her believe they had a future together, used her feelings against her. How sorry she was for betraying our friendship. I read it once, then deleted it. Forgiveness is a gift you give when someone has earned it. Rachel spent 17 years of friendship and threw it away for a fantasy. Some betrayals don't get redemption arcs. 2 years after the divorce, I attended a design industry event downtown. I'd been invited to speak on a panel about building businesses after major life transitions. During the networking reception afterward, a young woman approached me, late 20s, professional, nervous. "Mrs. Hayes?" she asked. "I'm Ashley Monroe. I wanted to thank you." "I don't think we've met," I said politely. "We haven't," she explained, "but I dated your ex-husband briefly, after your divorce." I studied her face, waiting. "He told me about how the marriage ended," she continued. "His version, anyway, about how you'd somehow tricked him into taking on debt he didn't know about. How you'd manipulated the divorce." She paused. "But I did some research, looked at public records, court filings, and I realized the truth, that he'd created that disaster himself and blamed you for not stopping him." She looked me directly in the eyes. "You taught me to never ignore red flags, to always verify what men tell me about their finances, to protect myself first." She smiled. "So thank you. Your story probably saved me from my own disaster." I was quiet for a moment, then I smiled back. "I'm glad something good came from it." We talked for a while longer. She was smart, cautious, building her own business. She'd seen through Marcus's stories, because she'd learned to question narratives that seemed too convenient. As she walked away, I realized something. My story had reached beyond just Sophia and me. It had become a lesson for other women, a reminder that patience and preparation and protecting yourself aren't selfish, they're survival. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. 3 years after the divorce, my design business had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. I had a small team, an office space, corporate clients, residential projects, everything I dreamed about when I was 23 and put those dreams on hold for Marcus's vision. Sophia was 15 now, thriving in school, confident and strong, and absolutely certain of her worth. She'd watched me rebuild from nothing. Watched me create success on my own terms. Watched me prove that you don't need someone else's approval to build something meaningful. She was dating a boy from her school, a sweet kid who treated her with respect. The first time he came to pick her up, she introduced us. "This is my mom," she said proudly. "She's the strongest person I know." The kid looked appropriately impressed. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Hayes." After they left, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine and thought about everything that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the humiliation, the garbage bags of belongings, the court hearing, a collapse of everything I'd thought was stable. And then the rebuilding, the slow, patient work of creating a life that was actually mine. Not built on someone else's dreams or someone else's approval or someone else's version of success. Just mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. Having fun? Be home by 10. Love you, Mom. I smiled and texted back. Love you too, sweetheart. That night, I pulled out my grandmother's recipe box. Opened it for the first time in months. Inside were her handwritten recipes, accumulated over 50 years of keeping her own kitchen, her own money, her own life. But tucked in the back was something I'd forgotten about. A letter she'd written to me before she died. I'd read it once years ago and put it away. I opened it now and read her familiar handwriting. My dearest Miranda, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I wanted to leave you with the wisdom that kept me strong for all these years. A woman must know her own worth, must keep her own resources, must never, ever let anyone convince her that she's less than she is. You are smart, capable, and stronger than you know. Don't ever let anyone make you small. And remember, the best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something beautiful from the ashes, and living well while those who underestimated you realize what they lost. I love you always. Keep your own money, sweetheart. Not secret money, just yours. Grandma Catherine. I read it 3 times. Then I carefully put it back in the recipe box and placed it on my shelf. She'd known. Somehow she'd known exactly what I'd need to hear. Exactly what lessons would save me when everything fell apart. 4 years after the divorce, I got an unexpected visitor at my office. Gerald Morrison, Marcus's divorce attorney. He stood in my reception area, looking uncomfortable, holding his briefcase like a shield. Mrs. Hayes, he said when I came out to greet him, I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I wanted to speak with you privately. We sat in my office. He refused coffee, tea, water, just sat there looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I need to apologize, he said finally. 4 years ago, I thought you were making the biggest mistake of your life. Thought you were a victim who didn't understand what you were giving up. He paused. I was wrong. Completely wrong. What you did was the most strategically brilliant legal maneuvering I've seen in 35 years of practice. I didn't say anything, just waited. I've used your case as a teaching example, he continued. With your identifying details changed, of course, to show young lawyers the importance of comprehensive financial disclosure, the danger of clients who refuse professional advice, the consequences of arrogance in legal proceedings. He looked at me with something like respect. You played a perfect game, Mrs. Hayes, and you won without anyone even realizing there was a game being played. I smiled. I just gave my husband exactly what he asked for. Gerald laughed, a real laugh. Yes, you did. He stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Marcus never recovered. Financially or professionally. He tells people you tricked him. But those of us who know the truth understand exactly what happened. What happened? I asked. He made his own choices and blamed everyone else when those choices had consequences. Gerald shook my hand. Congratulations on your business, Mrs. Hayes. You've built something impressive. After he left, I sat in my office, looking at the walls I'd painted, the desk I'd chosen, the business I'd created from nothing. Built something impressive. Yes, I had. 5 years after the divorce, Sophia graduated high school. Top of her class, full scholarship to university, plans to study business and law. At her graduation party, surrounded by friends and my family, she gave a speech thanking everyone who'd supported her. But especially my mom, she said, looking right at me, who taught me that strength doesn't mean never falling down. It means knowing exactly how to get back up. Who showed me that patience is a strategy, not a weakness. Who proved that you can lose everything and still win. Everyone applauded. My sister cried. My uncle raised his glass in a toast. I looked at my daughter, this brilliant young woman I'd raised mostly alone for the past 5 years. This girl who'd watched me go through hell and come out stronger. This future lawyer and businesswoman who understood that success isn't about what you're given, but what you build. And I knew that everything I'd been through, all the humiliation and patience and careful planning, it had been worth it. Because I'd protected her, given her security, shown her what real strength looked like. That night, after the party ended, Sophia and I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights. "Did you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "The way you handled the divorce? Waiting so long, not fighting differently?" I thought about her question. Really thought about it. Not for a second, I told her. I protected you, protected our future, and I proved to myself that I was stronger than anyone thought, including me. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I want to be like you when I grow up." I kissed the top of her head. "You already are, sweetheart, you already are." 6 years after the divorce, I attended a charity gala for a women's shelter. I'd been invited to speak about financial independence and rebuilding after domestic situations. Halfway through the evening, I saw him, Marcus, across the room, talking to someone I didn't recognize. He'd aged more than 6 years should account for. Gray in his hair, lines around his eyes, posture that spoke of defeat. He saw me at the same moment. Our eyes met across the crowded room. I smiled, polite, distant, the smile you give strangers. Then I turned back to my conversation and forgot he was there. Because that's what he was now, a stranger, someone I used to know, someone who'd taught me important lessons about trust and self-protection and never underestimating your own worth, but not someone who mattered anymore. At the end of the evening, as I was leaving, he approached me one last time. "Miranda," he said quietly, "you look good. Happy." "I am," I told him honestly. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. I was wrong about so much." "I know." He waited, like he expected more. Forgiveness maybe, or anger, or some kind of emotional closure. I gave him nothing. Just looked at him calmly, waiting for him to finish. "That's it?" he finally asked. "Just I know?" "Marcus," I said gently, "you spent our entire marriage making choices that benefited you without considering the consequences. You threw away our family for someone younger, and what you thought was a better life. You tried to take everything and leave me with nothing." I paused. "And the universe gave you exactly what you deserved. I don't need to add anything to that. The consequences you're living with are punishment enough." "I'm trying to rebuild," he said, "trying to do better." "Good," I said. "I mean that sincerely. I hope you succeed at building something real this time. Something that's actually yours, not borrowed or inflated or fake." I turned to leave. "Miranda," he called after me, "do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I looked back at him one last time. "I already have. Not because you deserve it, but because carrying anger would only hurt me. You're forgiven, Marcus. And you're also my past. That's all you'll ever be." I walked out into the night air, got into my car, and drove home to my apartment where Sophia was waiting to tell me about her first week of university. And I never thought about Marcus Hayes again. Not with anger, not with regret, not with anything, because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's building something so beautiful, so real, so completely yours, that the people who underestimated you become irrelevant. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I learned something better. The sweetest victory is when you don't need revenge at all. When you've built a life so full and satisfying that the people who tried to destroy you simply don't matter anymore. My name is Miranda Hayes. I'm 40 years old. I own a successful interior design firm. I have a brilliant daughter I raised to be strong and smart, and absolutely certain of her worth. I have a life I built from nothing, entirely on my terms, and I've never been happier. If you feel my words, show your support by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. And tell me from which city you belong, so I can see how far a woman's impactful voice can reach. Help me build this community so we can bring more truthful stories for you. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you're stronger than you know. And sometimes the best victory is simply refusing to be destroyed.